What happens when country music's sweetheart finds herself in the middle of a heated debate that spirals completely out of control? Well, buckle up, because what went down between Carrie Underwood and the hosts of Today with Jenna and Friends will leave you absolutely speechless. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts, because trust me, you're going to have plenty to say about this one. It all started as what seemed like a routine morning show appearance. Carrie Underwood walked onto the set of Today with Jenna and Friends, looking radiant as always, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a chic navy blazer that screamed professional yet approachable. The studio buzzed with its usual energy, cameras rolling, lights blazing, and the familiar hum of a live television broadcast filling the air. Jenna Bush-Hager greeted her with that trademark warm smile, gesturing toward the plush cream-colored couch that had hosted countless celebrities over the years. The other co-hosts settled into their positions, coffee mugs in hand, ready for what they assumed would be another pleasant chat about Carrie's latest projects, maybe some discussion about her family life, and perhaps a few laughs about life on the road. "Carrie, it's so wonderful to have you back on the show," Jenna began, her voice carrying that morning television cheerfulness that viewers had come to expect. "You look absolutely gorgeous, and we're so excited to talk about everything you've got going on." Carrie smiled politely, crossing her legs and adjusting her position on the couch. There was something slightly different about her demeanor today, a certain tension in her shoulders that the trained eyes of seasoned television hosts might have noticed, but in the moment, everyone seemed focused on maintaining that bright, upbeat energy that morning shows thrive on. "Thanks for having me, Jenna. It's always a pleasure to be here," Carrie responded, though her smile seemed just a fraction more strained than usual. The conversation began, innocuously enough, touching on her recent tour dates, the behind-the-scenes moments that fans love to hear about, and the usual questions about balancing her career with motherhood. Carrie answered each question with practiced ease, her responses polished and media-trained. Exactly what you'd expect from someone who had been navigating the spotlight for nearly 2 decades. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, one of the co-hosts decided to venture into territory that would prove to be far more controversial than anyone anticipated. The question came with a casual tone, as if it were just another routine inquiry. But the subject matter was anything but routine. "So, Carrie, we've been hearing a lot of discussion lately about artists and their responsibilities when it comes to social and political issues. There's been quite a bit of debate about whether entertainers should use their platforms to speak out on controversial topics. What's your take on that?" The studio fell into one of those momentary silences that occasionally punctuate live television, the kind where you can almost hear the camera operators shifting slightly behind their equipment. Carrie's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, her media-trained smile faltering for just a split second before she composed herself. "Well, that's certainly a loaded question," she said, her voice carrying a slight edge that hadn't been there moments before. "I think every person, whether they're in the entertainment industry or not, has the right to their own opinions and the right to express those opinions." Jenna, perhaps sensing that the conversation was heading into potentially choppy waters, attempted to steer things in a lighter direction. "Of course, and you've always been so thoughtful about how you approach these kinds of topics." But another co-host, apparently not picking up on the subtle warning signs, decided to press further. "But don't you think that with great influence comes great responsibility? I mean, when you have millions of followers hanging on your every word, shouldn't there be some consideration about the impact of what you say?" Carrie's jaw tightened slightly, and for the first time since sitting down, she leaned forward slightly, her body language shifting from relaxed guest to someone who was beginning to feel defensive. "I'm sorry, but are you suggesting that I should censor myself based on what other people might think? Because that seems like a pretty slippery slope to me." The tension in the studio was becoming palpable now, and you could see the producers behind the cameras beginning to shift nervously. This wasn't the direction anyone had anticipated the interview would take, and certainly not the kind of comfortable, feel-good content that morning show audiences typically expected. No, that's not what I'm saying at all," the co-host backtracked quickly. "I'm just wondering about the balance between personal expression and public responsibility." "Public responsibility," Carrie repeated, and there was definitely an edge to her voice now. So now we're talking about my responsibility to conform to whatever the popular opinion happens to be at any given moment. Because that's what it sounds like you're suggesting. The conversation was rapidly deteriorating, and you could practically feel the collective anxiety of everyone involved in the production. This was live television, and there was no taking back words once they were spoken into millions of homes across the country. Jenna attempted to jump in with damage control, her voice taking on that carefully modulated tone that experienced television hosts use when they're trying to diffuse a volatile situation. I think what we're all trying to say here is that we admire how thoughtfully you approach these complex issues. Carrie, we're not suggesting anyone should censor themselves, but Carrie was clearly not buying the attempt at diplomatic resolution. Her eyes had taken on a steely quality, and she shifted in her seat, turning slightly to face the co-host who had pushed the controversial question. You know what? Let's be honest about what's really happening here. You invited me on this show supposedly to talk about my music, my tours, my life. But what you really wanted was to corner me into taking some kind of political stance so you could either agree with me or tear me apart, depending on what I said. The studio atmosphere had become electric with tension. Camera operators were glancing nervously at their directors, and you could see staff members in the background exchanging worried looks. This was the kind of live television moment that could either become legendary or completely derail a show's reputation, and everyone knew it. The co-host who had initiated this line of questioning looked genuinely taken aback by Carrie's directness. That's absolutely not true, Carrie. We're just having a conversation. A conversation, Carrie's voice rose slightly, though she maintained enough control to avoid full-blown shouting. Is that what you call it when you set someone up with loaded questions designed to force them into a corner? Because where I come from, we call that something entirely different. Another co-host, perhaps foolishly, decided this was the moment to jump into the fray. Carrie, I think you might be overreacting a little bit here. These are legitimate questions that people are asking about public figures. The word overreacting hung in the air like a lit fuse, and you could practically see Carrie's composure finally beginning to crack. Her southern accent, which had been carefully modulated throughout her career, became more pronounced as her emotions intensified. Overreacting, she said, her voice dripping with incredulous anger. So now I'm an hysterical woman who can't handle a simple question. Is that really the direction you want to take this? Jenna was frantically trying to regain control of the situation, her hands moving expressively as she attempted to calm everyone down. Let's all just take a breath here. I think we've gotten off track from what was supposed to be a fun, light-hearted interview, but Carrie was beyond the point of polite television decorum now. She turned to face Jenna directly, her voice steady but filled with barely contained fury, fun and light-hearted. Jenna, with all due respect, there was nothing fun or light-hearted about the ambush I just walked into. You brought me here under false pretenses, and now you're trying to gaslight me into thinking I'm the problem. The word gaslight seemed to electrify the already charged atmosphere. It was the kind of term that had become loaded with cultural significance, and using it on live television in this context was like throwing gasoline on an already burning fire. Nobody is gaslighting anyone, one of the co-hosts protested, but their voice lacked conviction. As if they weren't entirely sure that was true, Carrie stood up abruptly, her movement so sudden that it caused a brief moment of chaos as camera operators scrambled to adjust their shots. She remained standing beside the couch, looking down at the seated hosts with an expression that mixed disappointment, anger, and something that might have been betrayal. You know what the really sad part about all of this is, she said, her voice quieter now but somehow more intense than when she had been raising it. I've been coming on shows like this for almost 20 years. I've always tried to be respectful, to be professional, to give you good television while still maintaining my integrity. And this is what I get in return. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the usual background noise of a television production seemed to have stopped, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Jenna made one final attempt at salvaging the situation. Carrie, please, let's just sit back down and start over. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Carrie looked at her for a long moment, and for just a second, it seemed like she might actually consider the offer. But then her expression hardened again, and she shook her head slowly. A misunderstanding, she repeated softly. You know what, Jenna? I think I understand perfectly. I understand that this show has changed, that maybe television has changed, or maybe I just never saw it clearly before, but I understand now. She began to move toward the edge of the interview area, her movements deliberate and controlled despite the obvious emotion coursing through her. The cameras followed her automatically, operators unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut away. I came here as a guest, as someone who has always respected this show and this network. She continued, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent studio. I thought I was coming to have a genuine conversation with people I considered friends. Instead, I walked into what felt like a calculated attempt to manufacture controversy at my expense. The co-hosts exchanged glances, each seemingly waiting for someone else to take the lead in responding. The weight of live television, where every second of silence feels like an eternity, was pressing down on everyone involved. The tension reached a breaking point as Carrie turned back toward the hosts one final time. Her expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve that seemed to cut through the studio lights like a blade. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every nuance of what was rapidly becoming one of the most explosive moments in morning television history. "You want to know what I really think about responsibility?" Carrie said, her voice carrying a quiet intensity that was somehow more powerful than shouting. "I think we all have a responsibility to treat each other with basic human decency. I think we have a responsibility to be honest about our intentions, and I think we have a responsibility to acknowledge when we've crossed a line." Jenna shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly recognizing that this situation had spiraled far beyond anything they had anticipated or prepared for. "Carrie, I want you to know that was never our intention." "Your intention," Carrie repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "Do you know what road is paved with good intentions, Jenna? Because I'm pretty sure we all learned that lesson in childhood." The reference wasn't lost on anyone in the studio, and you could practically feel the collective wince from the production team. This was the kind of pointed comment that would be replayed and analyzed for days, if not weeks, across social media and entertainment news outlets. One of the co-hosts, perhaps realizing that their careers might be hanging in the balance, made a desperate attempt at reconciliation. "Look, maybe we did come across more confrontational than we intended. If that's the case, we apologize. Can we please just reset and have the conversation we should have had from the beginning?" Carrie studied the co-host's face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether the apology was genuine or simply another calculated move. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but final. "You know what the difference is between a mistake and a pattern? A mistake happens once and you learn from it. A pattern is something you choose to repeat even when you know better." She paused, letting that observation settle over the room before continuing. "This isn't the first time I've sat on a couch like this and felt like I was being set up for failure. It's not the first time I've watched hosts smile at me while sharpening their knives, but it's going to be the last time I allow it to happen." The finality in her voice sent a chill through the studio. This wasn't just about this particular interview anymore. This was about a broader indictment of how the media machine operates, and everyone present seemed to understand the implications. Jenna made one last desperate plea. "Please don't let one bad moment define your relationship with this show or with us. We can fix this." Carrie shook her head slowly, a sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Some things can't be fixed, Jenna. Some things can only be learned from." She gestured broadly at the cameras, the lights, the entire production setup. "All of this whole machine, it's supposed to be about connecting with people, about sharing stories and bringing joy into people's lives. When did it become about gotcha moments and manufactured drama?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, and no one seemed to have an adequate response. The host sat in stunned silence, the weight of Carrie's words settling over them like a heavy blanket. "I've spent my entire career trying to be someone that people could respect, someone that parents would be comfortable having their children look up to," Carrie continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I've tried to use whatever platformer I've been given responsibly, thoughtfully, honestly, and if that's not enough for you, if you need me to be something else, someone else, then maybe this just isn't the right fit anymore." With that, she began walking toward the exit, her heels clicking against the studio floor in a rhythm that seemed to echo through the stunned silence. The cameras followed her movement. Unsure whether to cut away or continue documenting what was clearly a historic moment in live television. Just before she reached the edge of the set, Carrie stopped and turned back one final time. You know what I hope people take away from this? I hope they remember that it's okay to stand up for yourself. It's okay to say no when someone tries to put you in a box you don't belong in, and it's okay to walk away when staying would compromise who you are. And with that final statement, Carrie Underwood walked off the set of Today with Jenna and Friends, leaving behind a stunned group of hosts, a shocked production crew, and millions of viewers who had just witnessed something unprecedented in morning television history. The cameras lingered on the empty space where she had been standing, as if hoping she might change her mind and return. But the only sound was the soft hum of equipment and the barely audible whispers of crew members, trying to figure out what to do next. Well, there you have it, folks. An absolutely explosive confrontation that nobody saw coming and that will undoubtedly be talked about for years to come. What do you think about Carrie's decision to walk off? Was she justified in her reaction, or did things get blown out of proportion? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. And here's a question for you. If you were in Carrie's position, would you have handled it the same way or differently?